All right, I
All
think
right.
we can start. Yeah.
Debbie's in there as well, Daniel.
Oh, great. Excellent. Thanks.
All right. So I welcome everyone tonight to this amazing session all about healthy homes made simple. And it's all about nature-aligned architecture. We have amazing panelists today joining us tonight, and also a special guest, and I will reveal that in a few minutes. Before we jump in, I would just want to do also acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Evitat acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. We are here in particular to listen and learn and build a future together. I welcome everyone tonight. We have a packed session with some amazing insights, thoughts, and hands-on advice how to navigate actually for healthy homes. We have Talina Edwards here and also Andy Marlow from Envirotecture. I welcome you both. And we have a special guest, Debbie, who is joining us actually from overseas to take us a little bit through her experience to work with Envirotecture, but also to talk about how her home has changed and what influence that has on everything, how she experiences that home. So I want to hand over to Talina and Andy to give us a quick introduction before we dive actually into the next slides.
Thanks, Sonia. It's great to be here. I'm Talina, as you said, and I run the Victorian Office of Envirotecture. So we are here on Wadawurrung country, and I also want to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging for their continued care for this country, because I feel like we've still got so much more to learn about our connection to the land. So yeah, great to be here from Ballarat where we practice. And so yeah, we've got our two teams. We merged our practice with Envirotecture 18 months ago. We mainly focus on homes. We do other commercial community work as well, but homes in terms of new builds, renovations, retrofits, all of that, consults. We just love working with people to improve the places that they live, work and sleep.
Amazing. And Andy, maybe you jump in as well and say a few words about you and your experience.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. So my name's Andy Marlow. I'm one of the other directors in Envirotecture. I'm here tonight on Guy Marigal Land on the northern beaches of Sydney. And yeah, we, like Selena says, we do a lot of homes. I'm driven mostly by people and health. It seems crazy to me that we build things that don't make us healthy. If we're going to build something, you should be better off inside than you would be outside. And when that's not the case, my head explodes from frustration and anger. So anyway, tonight we're going to talk about some of the things we can do to improve that. So
awesome.
Looking forward to having a good chat.
Yeah, that's great, because that's exactly where we need to start our discussion. Like, we are facing like all kind of issues with the existing housing stock here across Australia, but it's also an international story you hear quite often. We have mold, we have like rising costs around the house, and that comes also with an fairly inflated property market. Often enough, people are then under pressure and don't invest actually in their homes anymore, which also then in the long run just deteriorates these homes just further. They are cold, and we were just talking about, even in Queensland, you can feel actually when a house is not built to healthy standards. And all of this in the summary contributes to it. So maybe to the two of you, maybe tell us, what is the least healthy home you've ever lived in? Oh.
And that was probably the home I grew up in, which was a wooden tent in Melbourne. And this was in sort of the outer northeastern suburbs where Alistair Knox and the mud brick community were. So I loved going to friends' homes or family or other people who had the beautiful solar passive mud brick home and, you know, roaring fire and all of that, because it felt so much warmer than the weatherboard kind of shed thing. It was a lovely home, but yeah, my dad did extend it and renovate it and made it solar passive, you know, with my granddad over the years. So they did try and improve it, but yeah, it was freezing. Cold. And there was always mold. There's always mold in everyone's bathrooms back then. Like, we just didn't know. We just thought it was a thing you had to live with.
And Andy, what's your worst experience?
Sorry, I've got two line ball ones. I grew up in England, and we lived in a very stock standard project home, as Australians would call them, and it had single glazed timber windows. And I just remember, like, eventually over the years we lived in the house, the windows eventually rotted because the condensation would just pool on the sill and then sort of vanish somewhere. So I remember that. And then I lived in the Blue Mountains when I first came here, and we lived in a house that was what was termed an Appalachian log home, and the wall was just a solid chunk of timber. It was about 100 mils thick, and it was very, very cold. And I remember when we first moved in, we used to turn the oven on and open the door.
Yeah,
on the floor next to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess everyone can share similar experiences as well. I have lived most of my life also in Germany. So while I have experienced far better standards there, coming here, actually, I've never felt so cold. And that's really one part of that whole journey. But even in overseas, like even in countries like Germany, where certain building standards might be better, there's a lot of consideration at the moment how to build actually more healthy and energy efficient. It hasn't been always the case as well. And they also tackle massive issues around mold and had a long journey. And along that journey came policies, which were sometimes not the best, actually, created a lot of issues as well. So I think we are all now collectively in that journey to understand better how to do it. But I remember in my childhood, there was around the corner of the place where we lived, a passive house opening, and it was quite exciting actually to visit that house. So and a lot of these experiences I carry and influence actually also the work I'm contributing today. It comes from these lived experiences to make things better, but to also know that they are actually better examples. And similar to Talina, for example, to experience something better, this is exactly the guiding principle. So another really important aspect is also climate change to consider. We are expecting our average temperatures to rise, and that has, of course, also certain consequences and certain effect on the well-being, how we experience actually homes. And temperature rising, for example, and maybe more of these extremes, even with cold periods in winter times, that will shape the way how we are thinking about homes and how we will be prioritizing also for comfort, for energy efficiency, and for health. So on that note, I want to hand over to you both, in particular, Talina, maybe to talk us a little bit through the practice Envirotecture and what are the key principles you're following, and then we will dive into the health aspects.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, we absolutely care about everything to do with nature and the human-nature connection. So it's all about buildings that are healthier for people and planet. So it's not just homes, but obviously we're here to talk about homes today. And for us, this is about, the natural environment, the built environment, and our inner environment as well. So straight on to the next slide, because I want to move through these relatively quickly so we can get to the good stuff and hear from Debbie about her home. So we've been thinking a lot about healthy homes recently, because it's such a huge area. And we started talking about if it's similar to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like it's not just about let's get off gas or using healthier materials. It's so much more than that. So the next few slides will talk about that, because health is often like it's the most important and the least visible thing. So when you're seeing pretty pictures, when there's always so many beautiful, pretty pictures of projects, you just can't see what's making the building healthy or not. So in terms of physical health, it is all about obviously having that safe shelter and a functional design, practical layout, all the really basics. It's about having something that's fit for purpose and that really good physical connection between indoors and outdoors, as well as the visual connection. So that was the Pure Passive House in Sydney that was one of the first passive house premium projects. So true net zero, has more solar panels than, harvest more energy than it uses. So that's a really great example of all of these things. I don't know if that slide's glitching at your end as well, or it's just my screen.
I can't see any glitches. Is it flickering or?
Yeah, there's a little photo jumping up, but that's okay. Let's move on. And then, in addition to the physical health, we also talk about physiological, and this comes back to what you mentioned about that comfort. And we're all saying often we're not warm in our buildings. This came up a lot in a little competition entry we did a few years ago called Little Pot of Gold, where we looked at the difference between NatHERS and Passive House. And the understanding that the World Health Organization really says our homes should not be getting below 20 degrees for health reasons. Like it does affect, especially elderly, infants, but everyone. So it's more than just people whinging about feeling cold or, discomfort. It's actually a health requirement. So we don't think it's acceptable that many people each year can be ill or die from heat exhaustion or being too cold in their homes. Like that's not okay in this day and age. So
true, absolutely.
And then, of course, respiratory health is the big one. And this was brought to light with COVID and airborne illnesses and all of that. But there's more to it than that. So we do spend up to 90% of our time indoors. And Australians love the great outdoors, and everyone who lives here does. Of course we do. But when we're inside, it needs to be that safe and healthy haven, and we need to be breathing fresh air. So the first thing is definitely no gas or burning. Really not burning wood inside either. That was great years ago when there were no alternatives, but now we have cleaner all electric alternatives. Or if we get our building fabric right, we need way less. Of course, these days, we don't do anything without mechanical ventilation. It is a health requirement. Many places overseas, especially Europe, they're shocked to understand that this is not a requirement here. So there's many reasons that is beneficial for our health. And then you can move on to making sure everything you're putting inside the house, which includes furnishings as well as all your wall, floor, ceiling coverings, your joinery, all of that. Ideally, that's also non-toxic and non-polluting. However, if you've got your good ventilation, that helps deal with that as well. And the last thing is we're always wanting to monitor what's actually going on in homes as well. So we regularly check in to just see how are those CO2 levels going, or is there any condensation happening? So we check on that as well. The other one that's often not talked about that we include is mental health, or our emotional well-being, and this comes into play with biophilic design, which is all about the human nature connection. So yes, we would love to be outdoors all the time, but that's not always appropriate unless we live in a cave or in a treehouse. So when we are inside, let's try and bring that sense of nature in. So it can be the views, physical and visual connection to the outdoors from as many rooms as possible without overglazing. But it's also about our choices of materials, textures, delight, watching the seasons, the things that I think I said delight, but delight our senses and work with the elements. So we try and always integrate this into projects because it gives them that more soulful connection. And there's a ton of science behind this too, that it does improve sleep, mood, productivity. So why wouldn't you try and include that if you can?
Absolutely. And it makes also the space feel just right, probably, in that sense. I think, you know, you can have spaces which are really cold, even in the way how they have been designed. But these elements are actually contributing to something very humanized, and that's a really nice way to look at it.
And then the next one, which, you know, as we said, probably should be the first one. I'm kind of doing the inverted pyramid here, so I need to work on my graphics. But this is then around looking after the environment. So building less, using less of planet's resources, reducing impact on biodiversity loss, because we're not just in a climate emergency, we're also in a biodiversity emergency. So how can we work with that and have a better impact too on the land? Reducing that overconsumption, reducing carbon footprint. So with reducing operational energy, we do that with fabric first approach, and again, passive house, because we need way less heating, cooling and operational energy. But then the lower embodied carbon side of things is all about the materials we choose and where they're sourced from. And then the last one, which is probably the top of the pyramid, is what we call regenerative health. So this is all about caring for country, but also it comes out of the Living Building Challenge and about this idea, what does good look like? How can we not just have a less worst impact? Because sustainability is trying to do less bad. But instead, what if we looked more to the future and thought, how can we do more good? How can we have a positive impact? So what if we do still have to build things. We have people, we have house, we need to house them. So if we are building something, how can we do the best possible, most ethical thing at the time? How is that going to respect the land? Can it improve it? Can it, not pollute, but give back in some way? So a lot of that's around the connection to the site and the community, educating, advocacy, regenerating the soil, replanting, encourage species back to the site. So yeah, all about looking forward to future generations. And the last thing around that with the future generations too, with a lot of the modelling we do, we are checking on what is that +4 degree world, which you touched on before. Like, what does it mean if we get to that that scary place? But we can know that if we're investing money in building something, it can be more resilient for the future as well. So it's not going to be out of date tomorrow, because there's still plenty of buildings going up right now that essentially need retrofitting tomorrow. So that's still more waste. So we want to prevent.
I love actually that thought, and it's really reflecting also in our mission statement. If you are at the point where you are spending that money, spend it in something and in a concept which is low footprint, which really fills the purpose of a home. And put that right at the top of everything, because it will last for maybe not even just for your generation, but even for future generations, and it will really serve well. So it's a great way actually to look at it, and really shifts that whole messaging from resale value to something very, very purposeful and meaningful, and finding the right place. On that note, before we jump into the case study, what are the biggest mistakes or incorrect assumptions, for example, you see from clients or builders that you would like to see put to bed?
I'll let Andy have a say.
I think it very much depends on the context of what's, you know, what's happening at the time in that sense. Just because it's been in my head in the last few days, I think one of the things, so when projects are first being conceived and sort of, you know, briefs are being decided and all of that stuff, there's often what I feel is a fairly unhealthy focus on the idea of resale value and overcapitalization. And it's mostly around the fact that what it's really talking about is like it's a product of having commercialized, commodified what is basically a human right. And I think the conflicts that arise from those things are not particularly helpful. It doesn't mean that you have to consider the financial side of stuff because you've got to pay for it. But I feel that it can often derail things in a few cases. To be fair, we don't experience much of that, but a lot of my colleagues, well, you know, patriots do, because we see that. So that's possibly one of them. And then there's probably some other detail stuff further down the line. But that's probably from a big conceptual thing. Don't forget that the purpose of the home was to be healthier and happier to begin with, and everything else should be secondary to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely share that sentiment, because it is actually, like, if we are looking at the spend on building a home or even doing a major renovation or anything, it is a quite significant spending you do, and just putting it actually out there, for within the context of resale value, you're letting actually someone else guiding the principles completely and taking it completely out of the context of fulfilling that purpose. So, and I think a lot issues we see today with homes not performing well, not delivering on their core purpose, is actually steered exactly out of that conflicting messaging. So hopefully we can grow actually that understanding. And I know there has been a lot of work done in the past in that space, but it's now really something we urgently need to reconsider and put actually that money to work and to create homes with purpose and meaning.
One of the things in there that I find quite interesting is that you find that a lot of people who do put the money in the stuff that really makes a difference, i.e. into the envelope and making the building perform, those people very rarely move house. For those people, generally one of the things that comes up is, where would I go? Because this place is great and it works and everything else doesn't. So there's this wonderful irony that there's no data about the value of these homes because nobody sells them, but nobody sells them because they're so good. It's sort of unhelpful. It's kind of lovely. Mostly it makes me smile.
Yeah, I think this is to some degree where we have started actually the idea of the logbook for sustainable homes. I know that they might not sell immediately as quick, but over time, every improvement on that side is really valuable. And that's exactly, I will jump into that at the end of this webinar and explain that a little bit better. But that's exactly what we want to support, to put a new value proposition for every single decision you make along that journey to improve your home, to make it sustainable and purposeful. Yeah. So the case study, I also want to welcome Debbie. Give me just a second. And maybe Andy, give us a little bit of an overview before we hand over to Debbie to ask her how that process worked and how she wants to walk us through the changes.
Fair enough. So a few years ago now, Debbie and her partner approached us. They had bought a property, a house up at Copacabana, which is on the central coast of New South Wales, so an hour and a smidge north of Sydney. And they had been looking for quite some time to buy a block of land to build their dream home, and then basically couldn't find a block of land that ticked the boxes, and eventually found this place. And it's the most wonderful place. It's a huge block of land. It's like, it's not that far from the beach, but it's got this weird, it's tucked in behind a whole bunch of other houses. So from memory, Debbie will correct me if I'm wrong, they have 27 neighbors of people whose boundaries adjoin their boundary. So it's nestled in this lovely little place. You come down a beautiful driveway to get there. There's a lot of trees around, which are beautiful, but not awesome from a shading perspective, in terms of they create more shade than you want in winter. And anyway, the house, as you'll see from some of the imagery, had a very, very distinctive style. And that was both wonderful and challenging, because you architecturally, you had no choice but to just kind of roll with it. To change it would have just, you'd have ended up pulling the house down. They didn't want to pull the house down. It also had a fairly unfunctional floor plan initially. So our role was to basically make the building work. We made it a little bit bigger, but fundamentally we upgraded everything. We did not reclad the building, well, partly for environmental reasons, partly for cost reasons, partly because the cladding itself was actually okay. So I'll let Debbie talk a bit more about some of the parts of it, because I think it's more interesting to hear from her than me. But yeah, we did pretty full-blown retrofit. Lovely builder, did a great job. Debbie will talk about whether she thinks it was a good job at the end, I suppose. I might stop rambling and let Debbie say a few words.
Hi, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as Andy said, we bought the house. Sorry, I'm somewhere where there's a lot of background noise. I hope it's not disturbing everybody. And realized that it, first of all, was extremely cold, and second of all, the flow of the house just wasn't sensible. It was a 20-year-old house. It had been renovated in the 20 years, but not very much. And I think both previous owners had sold the property because they were defeated by the temperature. So we were very fortunate that we found Andy, because he came in and just solved our problems. Initially, we had some robust discussions about glazing. I, like a typical Australian, wanted to have big windows that looked out at everything and, you know, made you feel like you were outside. And Andy talked me out of that largely because of the thermal impact that windows have. And now that we've, you know, lived in the renovated house, I do agree that Australians have a very big emphasis on the way houses look and the wow factor. And one of the biggest wow factors in houses is when you walk in and you see a fantastic view. And usually that's achieved by huge, great windows, which is why so many Australians end up living in glass houses. And while that is a wonderful impact, it's not great from a thermal perspective. And I'm really glad we didn't end up making the mistake that I would have made had we perhaps had a different architect and one that was more persuadable by me to do what I thought I wanted at the time. So anyway, we had a house that was extremely cold. It was unpleasant to get up in the morning in winter. We had a wood burning stove, a really nice wood burning stove, which we think the previous owners had put in an attempt to warm the house up and make it livable. But it had to be lit 24 hours of the day in order to make the house bearable in winter. In summer, the house was fine. It's perfectly aligned for summer because it's shaded and it's cool, but it was really, really cold in winter. And as you can see, it's got really high ceilings and all the warm air just goes straight up into the ceiling. So even when you were heating the house, all the air was just disappearing out the walls and the ceiling, and it was a constant battle. So that was our first priority, was to warm the house up. The second priority was to allow more light into the house. And the third priority was to fix the flow of the house. The flow was very strange. We have a swimming pool, and yet there was no direct access from the house to the swimming pool. You kind of had to go around the house, around the front garden, out the front door, down the steps, around the front garden to get to the swimming pool. So, you know, that's just not ideal from an entertainment perspective. We also didn't really have any proper entertainment area. There's a huge deck out the front, but it's completely unshaded, and it's on the north side of the house, so it gets really, really hot. And we tried having guests there for lunch and eventually had to retreat backwards and backwards and backwards until we were all crammed up against the side of the house trying to huddle under the eaves. And we were still too hot. So Andy came along, and with one fell swoop of his drawing pen, he solved all our problems. He redesigned the flow so that we have a deck on the west side of the house, which connects directly with the swimming pool. And the flow of the house has been absolutely, it's 1,000,000 times better than it was. He fixed the thermal problems by wrapping the house up in insulation. So we have insulated the walls, we've insulated the ceilings, we've insulated under the floor, we insulated everything we could possibly insulate. Now, obviously, as a renovation, you can't get the level of insulation as good as you could if you were doing a new build. So sadly, you know, we've had to make some compromises. So the house will never be a passive house, but it is so much more thermally efficient. I can't even begin to describe. I insisted on us keeping our wood burning stove, despite both my husband and Andy saying it wasn't going to be necessary. But first of all, I like a log fire, and I thought it was a good idea to have the option of having one. And second of all, I was worried in case the thermal house was not going to be good enough and I'd still need the wood burning stove in winter. And I have to say, we have not used it, not once. We barely even have to heat the house. We have reverse cycle air conditioners in 3 of the rooms, which we have coming on in the morning and the evenings in various combinations during winter. And we have underfloor heating in the bathrooms, which we use we have ours on all the time, and we turn the guest bathroom underfloor heating on when we have guests. But that's all we need. So we don't even have to heat the house all the time. You know, I'm quite careful. I go around the house every evening closing curtains, which make a huge difference. Even though we've put in really, really nice double glazed windows, having curtains does help. And most of our house is still uncurtained. We have only curtained the bedrooms. So that's possibly a way we could even improve the thermal comfort of the house even more, would be to put something on the windows that we could close during the winter on the rest of the house, but we haven't got there yet. Yeah, I think, have I said it all?
Yeah. You have also improved certain areas, like, for example, the kitchen area. And I think that also shows actually that it's a holistic approach. So it's also including these very high traffic areas, making them really work well. But also, of course, the comfort and other aspects of the house. So, Danya, do you have the plans maybe ready?
Well, I don't have the plans. I thought they may have been on one of the slides.
No, they are in the Drive folder. Maybe we can just open them.
Okay, give me a second. I'll find them. Maybe in the meantime, Debbie, I guess I wanted to ask from a first principles perspective. I guess it's quite a deep retrofit project. I was kind of wondering what your motivations were in general for the project, and in terms of kind of sustainability and health, and why you went with someone like Envirotecture instead of just any old architect, you know?
Yeah, we are fairly concerned about sustainability and our impact on the environment. So when we originally, as Andy said, we were looking to build a passive house in a area, but we were either going to have to buy a field with no trees, or we were going to have to remove a lot of trees in all the plots of land we looked at that were available at the time, and that didn't tick any boxes. So when we found a house that was not a knockdown but had to be retrofitted, we wanted to do it in a way that had the least possible impact. So I guess it was a bit of a process. I mean, we wanted to reuse as much of the material in the house as possible. We wanted to get as little changed. In fact, the kitchen's a good example. We weren't planning on changing the kitchen at all. And it was just when Andy's plans came out with this much, much better kitchen that we decided we would change the kitchen. So one of our criteria when we were selecting a builder was, I asked the builders, you know, can we reuse things? Like, can we take the architraves off the windows and reuse them? Can we take the skirting boards off the walls and reuse them? And most builders looked at me as if I was from another planet. And they said, why would you want to do that? You know, we have to remove them so carefully. It's just going to cost you money. They're old, they're tatty, they're bashes and dings. Why do you want to do that? No, we can't do that. And our builder that we eventually selected sort of looked a bit askance, but he said, yes, we can do that if that's what you want. And they did. And my goodness, they did a good job. As Andy said, we didn't reclad the house, but because we extended the house, we needed more cladding. But they took off the cladding where we extended and reused every last inch of that cladding where they could. And then there were just 2 walls that needed new cladding in the end. And so we decided to go with a completely different cladding because we couldn't buy the same cladding anymore. So we got a completely different one and reclad the 2 walls. But the builders removed everything really carefully, saved it, reinstalled it. And it made us feel like at least we weren't just trashing something that was perfectly reusable. We tried everywhere to do that. We kept the doors, we kept the door handles, we kept the architraves where we could, the skirting boards, everything. We still have a pile of wooden floor. One of the floors in the house was wooden and the rest was tiled. And we decided to put wooden floors throughout the house. So we ended up with a completely new wooden floor. And the floor that was wooden, we removed the floorboards really carefully. And they're still sitting in our shed waiting to be used by some other project. So yes, we were very concerned about our impact and not making too great a damage on the environment.
Well, it definitely speaks to the value of having a builder that's on site and understands as well. I guess for you as well, Andy, had you worked with this builder before? I imagine it would have made it a lot easier that they were on site.
He was, so this is a guy called Andrew, just to confuse things, from Lou Projects. No, it was the first time we'd worked with him. And yeah, he was fantastic. He's a young guy, he's madly passionate about the things we're madly passionate about. And he had an awesome team of people around him. And that was, I mean, especially for Pat and Debbie on site, interacting with them more. But yeah, they were just a nice bunch of humans who just wanted to do a good job. They did all the things Debbie said, like they were really good. There's a little bit of joinery near the big sliding doors that we'd designed, and they're just like, oh yeah, we can make that. We don't need to go to the joiner. Like, they did a stunning job of all of those little details. So yeah, he's definitely a firm favorite.
And I think this shows exactly how important it is actually to find the right experts. Even, you know, when you're finding the right design expert, you need actually the right builder to continue that and to have a full agency in carrying it through and having then such an amazing outcome. I think this is a beautiful example, really, to understand that it's repurposing and containing actually that existing structure, but also to be mindful of existing materials and not to dump everything into landfill just because you can. And that's often the case, or what happens. It's just this one thought. We demolish and then we just use the new things which are getting purchased and procured. I think this is a beautiful way to look at it. and really to be mindful, to repurpose as much as possible. And it saves maybe here and there also a little bit of cost, but it's a great way to really have a small footprint as much as possible. Yeah. So Debbie, have you also, like, we know now that it has changed a lot around comfort. Have you noticed any direct health outcomes which tie that part in particular from not, for example, using the wood fire stove 24/7, and how is it actually living now in that home? Like what is maybe for you one thing you recognize the most, or a couple of things? What would you say?
Well, the most big change for me is the fact that I can get out of bed in the mornings without feeling like I'm going to die of cold, and go and have a shower. Our bathroom was horrible before. Now, you know, it's a pleasure to get up, go to the bathroom, have a shower. The house feels warm, which in Europe, you know, people are used to that. In Australia, we're all used to freezing. And that is a very, very big health benefit, I think. Because also if your core temperature is low in the morning when you leave the house, it takes you a long time to warm up. Whereas if you wake up and you're already at a good core temperature, you go outside, you just need to put a jacket on, you will be warm and comfortable for the whole day. So it's completely makes a huge change. And I grew up in South Africa where houses are equally bad and where we freeze equally, you know, it's the same as Australia. And as a child, I never, ever wanted to get out of bed in winter. It's just so different from Europe. The wood-burning stove aspect, neither my husband nor I have any respiratory issues. So we never really suffered from a respiratory point of view. But, you know, our clothes don't smell of wood smoke. Our furniture doesn't smell of wood smoke. The thing that used to sometimes concern me was we were in a kind of a bowl. And when we lit the fire, you know, you'd see the smoke pouring out of the chimney and you think, oh gosh, we're probably smoking out all the neighbors. And we were just waiting the day we were going to get a knock on our door from one of our neighbors saying, you know, I'm tired of breathing your smoke and my children are dying of asthma. Please stop burning your fire. So it's great that we no longer have to think about that.
Yeah, that's even a beautiful, actually, a statement, because it is also then caring about the next around you. And I know that respiratory issues are heavily like a big concern and a growing concern as well, because of a lot of these air pollutions going around. And we had a couple of webinars before that around even mechanical ventilation and other solutions. But it is really nice to know, for example, that someone really cares also about the neighbors and puts that actually to work in a new way. So it's a great way actually to look at it. So
Debbie, I wanted to ask you, maybe, sorry, before we move on, I guess after going through this whole process with the building, with Andy and this project, and maybe things you learned along the way, is there maybe one piece of advice you could give other renovators or homeowners that want to do something similar? Maybe something that you thought, oh, I wish I'd done this differently, or like a big educational piece for you from doing this that you could share with people?
I think in our case, you couldn't change the orientation of the building. I think orientation is your first prize, is getting that right. But the second prize is insulation. And I never appreciated quite how much difference good insulation would make. Now, we use pump-in insulation in our walls and in the cathedral ceilings, which we're still not 100% sure if that was the right decision, because obviously it was slightly cheaper and less messy than pulling down all the walls and insulating. As you can see, that's a new wall that was built, and that was done with proper thick wool insulation. But please, if you are thinking about renovating your house, I would say the first thing to consider, the most important thing, and the thing to spend your money on, is insulation. Get the best you can afford. find out what the options are. There may be more options than you realize, and do everything. Because if the house is well insulated, then you are in control of that thermal envelope, and you can manage the heat and the cool of the house so much more easily than if it's not.
Debbie, can I just ask, the house is slightly elevated. So do you have also underfloor insulation, or
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the house is elevated, and it had no insulation whatsoever underneath it. So not only did we have the heat disappearing out the ceiling, we had the lovely cold from the ground underneath the house rising up to greet our feet every morning when we got up. So we've put a very thick insulation. There was a debate as to whether to do the spray insulation or I forget what it is. It's sort of rolls of insulation that you tack under the house. And I can't remember why we made the decision for rolls of insulation, but we've done that. It was a pretty awful build job. You know, the builders had to crawl under the house and lie there and stick the stuff up. But it has, again, made the world of difference. We've changed the floors from tiles to wood, so I think that's helped too. But, you know, it's just those wood floors with would have had nothing underneath them had we not put the insulation, and they are lovely and warm foot.
Yeah, we did the spray stuff that you'd put under the floor is a foam based one, and it does an all right job, but it's pretty messy if you ever need to go back and change services or do anything later. So from memory, that was, I think, one of the bigger drivers. It's just the ability to be able to fix stuff at some point in the future, because buildings need maintenance. The other thing we haven't actually mentioned, which we should briefly just pop in the mix, is that we did also put in a couple of decentralized MVHR fans as well. We didn't do the whole house in this case for a bunch of reasons, but we did put in some ventilation to mostly in the bedroom was, I guess, the bigger, or is nearly always the bigger concern, because that's you're asleep and you can't do much about it when you're asleep. Whereas the living spaces we were less phased by. So yeah.
And it's an all-electric home, or
Yes, it's all electric. We have solar panels on the roof, and we have a Tesla battery, which we actually had done before the renovation. We subsequently have made our roof bigger because we've extended out to the west with the deck, and we've extended back to south with the bedroom, and that actually gives us more east facing and north facing roof. And we're actually considering putting more solar up because our trees shade us a lot in winter, and our winter solar production is pretty dismal. But with a few more panels, especially on that north-facing roof, I think we could do better. But everything, we replaced our gas stove. We had a gas stove that was replaced with an induction stove. Again, I'd never cooked on induction, but love it. Absolutely a convert. And everything else is electric. Our hot water, we've got a heat pump driven hot water system. Everything is electric. We took away the bottled gas altogether.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, perfect. Oh, that's a very great deep retrofit going all electric journey. So congratulations to everyone involved. It's a beautiful house, and I can just imagine Debbie living in such a great place. It's just a pleasure. So we have only 10 minutes left. I also want to explain a little bit why we have onboarded Envirotecture actually to Evitat and what Evitat is. So Evitat is really building a strong ecosystem for trust and transparency. And that comes also, for example, through the lens of supply. We do ask thorough questions around anything of evidence around sustainability claims. That means also every single supplier, every single manufacturer listed on Evitat is vetted. And we provide that information in a human-centric way, easier to understand and often enough in a very strongly contextual and technical way. But we dive also, of course, deep and provide all the technical specs and anything you need to know. It ranges from technical specs, but also embodied carbon, what to do with the materials, for example, at end of life, what impact they have. It also states, for example, if a material or a product has some health benefits, energy efficiency benefits, and so on, because we want to bring in that collaborative way and a better agency actually for those solutions in the market. We can only grow that market if we find adaptable, if it gets adapted actually across. And for example, we know that Envirotecture has used also in the past, like even biomaterials, for example, in certain projects and so on. And what we are currently looking at, for example, also the issues across supply chain, that can only be tackled if we grow here even a better manufacturing base. And that's an opportunity really to do it in a more conscious way, low carbon, low embodied energy, and supply really great solutions into the market. So that's one part of the platform. The other part, we are also looking at vetting always the professionals as well. And that comes with a range of criteria. They need to be experienced in delivering these projects. And when we are talking here about professionals, that ranges again from architects, passive house, building designers, across to the builders who deliver these projects and trades. So we want really to have a better transparency into that ecosystem, and also to enable better collaboration even across these stakeholders. Integrated in the logbook integrated into the Evitat platform is the logbook, and I might actually jump quickly into one example. Give me just a second. And the logbook and even the platform is completely for free to use. We are developing and going to release a lot of big updates in the upcoming months. But this is the current version out there. And I will take you into an example and exactly what Andy was mentioning even previously. I think what we want to show here is we let all that good decisions flow into your logbook. And you can start actually collating all of this. It will be measured across 6 core categories, which includes also healthy home, comfort, affordability, efficiency, social, environmental responsibility, and carbon emissions. And with that, you have the great opportunity whenever you're ready maybe to sell for whatever reason. Although we know that usually people are staying in their great performing homes, but at some point you might want to sell. You can demonstrate that, you can attach that in future also to, for example, a real estate listing. And it's actually quite easy, and in particular with onboarded professionals and also suppliers on the Evitat platform. We are currently developing ways to automate also the data flow into your logbook, so it becomes even more easy. But we have also introduced lately a feature which will be added here in my documents, where you can upload, for example, even order documents. Let's say you have started that journey, and we acknowledge that the journey is not always one big renovation, let's say a major renovation or something. Sometimes it happens in small steps through maybe a solar PV system, a hot water heat pump, or anything. And you can add these things, so you can start your journey and just contribute continuously to it. But it's a great way to showcase and demonstrate what you have done over time. So on this note, I jump back. to the slides.
It's funny, I was going to go to that 1 million women's thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, maybe that's a good, maybe I'll just mention that now,
Exactly.
Sonia. Yeah. Yes, everyone, we're going to be up in Sydney at 1 Million Women's 15th birthday celebration at the Carriage Works, which I think
Yes.
is in Newtown. Yeah, so Festival
Yes.
of Solutions. It's going to be Craig Roos Castle is going to be there. Amazing exhibitors. It's a big celebration about what we can all do about sustainability. Gina Chick is going to be playing. John Butler is going to be playing, and we're giving away some free tickets. So if anyone wants to come along, drop a message. Obviously, if you're based in Sydney, drop us a message now in the Zoom or send me a message after this. And yeah, we have a few tickets to give away. So come along. It's going to be a great day.
Yeah. In particular, if you happen to be in Sydney or you live in Sydney, around Sydney, then at least your drive or your travel time is small and not too much. So yeah, just send us a quick chat message and you will go into the draw. It would be fantastic maybe to welcome you at our stall because we will have also a couple of things to showcase. Yeah, and just enjoying also the Saturday at this amazing festival and supporting 1 million women. Thank you, everyone. In particular, our panelists, Talina, Andy, and Debbie. Debbie, really big thank you for talking us through all the details and telling and sharing with us actually the experience you have now in your new home. I think this is a very valuable lesson, and hopefully we can inspire many, many others with these journeys to improve their homes, to change them, and to give them a new, basically a new lease and continuing them to serve really well to even future generations. So
yeah, Andy and Talina, do you maybe have a leaving note you'd like to leave us on? Maybe one takeaway for people that are thinking of renovating and the biggest thing they can do for health, something you'd like everyone to walk away thinking about.
Talina, ladies first.
I'm just thinking it's forefront in my mind at the moment because I was at the My Efficient Electric Home book launch last week, and we're all about getting off gas, and it's still a shock that that's still not well known. Like this was released more than 10 years ago. The climate beyond zero emissions, I think, huge report said gas is not good for health reasons. Gas is not a renewable resource. Gas is not going to be affordable forever. And it's still being installed. People going, I'm cold. Oh, we'll put in some gas heating. No, there are so many reasons why no. So yeah, upgrade your building envelope first if you can with your insulation, your draft proofing, all of that. And if you can put a reverse cycle air conditioner in, then that's way healthier than gas. So yeah, it's not as simple as that, but yeah, get off gas, please. Please.
yes, definitely. Yeah.
Andy?
Look, mine's probably going to be around reliable ventilation. It's kind of the key. It's the health key. It's the one thing that will save your building and you from a whole bunch of other things that haven't been done properly. So it's probably ending up being the most important. So yeah, works well with all the other things, but yes, doing the other things and not ensuring good ventilation is a recipe for disaster. So I guess it's the holistic approach, and as an architect, that's what you'd expect me to say. But buildings are complicated things. All these things interact, and you need to understand how they interact. Otherwise, it all goes a bit off the rails. So
true. I think ventilation is a big topic, in particular because we are moving to better airtight things we are doing even with our existing buildings. And I'm not even talking about the new buildings, but when we are making them airtight, ventilation becomes a very central piece to consider. So yes, I think that's great advice, and hopefully everyone will stick to these advices and whenever we are doing some renovation choices, to prioritize these ones first. So thank you everyone for this great session, diving deep also into the principles. And again, we have Envirotecture also on Evitat. If you want to reach out, you can also ask any follow-up questions in community, because we will be sharing the recording as well. And I'm sure Andy and Talina will jump in to answer any questions, but you can also reach out to their website to discuss your projects with them. And yes, I hope to see you then maybe on Saturday at the festival. Come and say hi, in particular if you have already, because I saw some have maybe already some tickets. So this is great. And yeah, and let's continue advocating actually for better homes and healthier outcomes. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your evening.
Thanks all.
See ya.
Thanks, Deb.